היום באין גבול, רעיון מיוחד. ג'ון ספנסר הוא אחד המומחים הגדולים בעולם ללוחמה בשטח בנוי. הוא גם ראש התחום הזה בווסט פוינט, זאת האקדמיה הצבאית המהוללת של ארצות הברית.
לאחרונה חזר מביקור בישראל וגם בגבול, שבו התרשם מאוד מקצב ההתקדמות של צה"ל בנסיבות בינלאומיות מורכבות למדי. Hello, Mr. Spencer.
Hello.
Israel is a democracy, which is why we hear a lot of views about the success of this war in Gaza. I'd like to hear your point of view on this. What grade will you give the IDF so far?
I mean, for me, it's a historic accomplishment, really, the speed at which the IDF have moved and the steps the IDF have made to prevent civilian casualties, despite the mass media use of wrong context and everything. And the scale of the operation that the IDF is doing in Gaza, it's historic, and one, in the complexity of the challenge the IDF has faced, but also in the low number of casualties the IDF have taken and the steps they've taken to prevent civilian casualties, despite Hamas wanting as many civilians to die as possible.
You wrote that this is more than any American army has done before, taking so many steps to protect the civilian population that the war is going on against. Really?
Absolutely. To include the operations I've partaken in I was in Iraq twice, but any operation to include Mosul, Aleppo, Raqqa, Fallujah, all of them, no military has ever tried to call everybody in a building before they strike it. No military has given out their maps, not the U.S. All the steps that we have taken, as in the United States, in past urban battles, or any other military, the IDF have done that, but also done so many things that no military has ever done, even try, like the calling 2 million calls of pre-recorded calls going to everybody in the environment, trying to get them out of the combat areas. I mean, even the maps, which I thought was amazing. I've just never seen it. The IDF giving their maps to the civilians, and unfortunately to Hamas, saying, look, we'll be in this area, stay out of this area, it's the high-risk area. All of it's historic.
But isn't this just an indication that Israel is not an empire like the United States or Britain or other countries? Cannot allow itself to do the same things?
No, I think it's a representation that Israel, the IDF, a law-abiding military with an ethical, a moral code of their citizens, follows all the standard things that have been developed in war and has learned faster than everybody else, and is trying to do this because all war is a contest of will. So the perception of the use of force in this war and the bias against Israel could have compounded to where Israel would have been not forced, but strongly encouraged by the international community to stop, like we saw even with the bogus ICJ complaint by South Africa, which is just not factual.
But the Biden administration has been very critical also of the war in Gaza and say that Israel has been using many dumb bombs and not enough of precise bombs. Would you disagree?
100% disagree, because historically it just doesn't stand up to the test of times, not to U.S. operations or anybody else's. There's no way anybody could fight a all war with only precision-guided munitions. And to call dumb bombs, again, it's a bias. It's a misconception. It's not factual. They're tools or bombs or anything that doesn't have a certain technology on it. But historically, those are the predominant thing. And Israel makes those so-called dumb bombs more accurate. It's just a matter of how accurate and precise the weapon is. But to call them dumb bombs is actually not factual either, because it's trying to convince everybody that they're indiscriminate. No, Israel is targeting something and it hits what is targeted. That's called discriminate. That's called law-abiding. That's what militaries do. So again, it's a misconception of even using those statistics of precision-guided versus dumb bombs. It's just ridiculous.
Mr. Spencer, you wrote a fascinating article about Hamas's strategy, basically saying it's entirely based on tunnels, not only military-wise, but also politically.
Absolutely. So unlike any any environment I've ever studied, Hamas built tunnels, which are not new. I mean, that's the history of warfare, to avoid detection, to avoid strike. But the fact that Hamas built them only under the civilian areas and doesn't let civilians in them to put forth its strategy, which its ultimate goal, they say it, is to create as many civilian deaths as possible so Israel can't get to them, and they win the war. They win the strategy by getting everybody else to get Israel to stop. But that use of hundreds of miles of tunnels is very unique and a first in war as well, to build them only under the civilian areas and only under protected sites like hospitals, schools, mosques, so that Israel can't move forward or is complicated in maintaining the political will, even the domestic will, because it also bides time. And Israel usually in the past hasn't had a lot of time, even when it's being attacked by 5 nations. So Hamas has studied Israel and built a tunnel system to try to defeat Israel politically, not militarily.
So how does Israel win the war when the IDF is fighting against Hamas in the tunnels?
Yeah, I mean, winning is always hard to define, but Israel can defeat and dismantle Hamas's military capability, which is its strategy, its stated goal, by clearing dense urban terrain, house by house, tunnel by tunnel, and it's needed time. And again, this is historic. I mean, the fact that just northern Gaza was cleared by the IDF, in the past, it would take months and months to do that. It took 100,000 Iraqi security forces 9 months to clear one city, which didn't have 1/3 of the fighters that Hamas does. And it took them 9 months to clear it. So Israel achieves the goal of taking that strategy away from Hamas by methodically but carefully clearing every inch of Gaza to return the hostages and dismantle Hamas's military capabilities so it can never hurt Israel again. Those are all achievable, but it takes time and preventing civilian casualties, which is what the IDF have done.
Your professional assessment would be how much time?
So the enemy gets a vote with that. I would have thought it would have. I wouldn't have. My professional opinion, based on the tunnels, how many Hamas fighters there were, the hostages, I thought it would have taken 6 months just to clear northern Gaza. It seems to be taking about 2 months to clear certain cities and neighborhoods. So if you compound that, I mean, you still need 2 to 4 more months of clearing in Gaza, but the enemy gets a vote. Hamas could stop this tomorrow, give all the hostages back, surrender, and disarm. It could end tomorrow, so nobody can really tell you.
As you know, it's very difficult to win a war without a plan for the day after, and Israel has been very reluctant on that, and that created another front with the United States.
Yeah, I've seen lots of plans by Israel and the IDF for the day after, what that looks like. But really, to me, the day after isn't an only Israel problem. Yes, Israel will have dismantled Hamas and its military capability. What the day after looks like from a security perspective is there's some clear steps that have to be taken, and the reoccupying of all of Gaza's areas. But who governs it isn't only an Israel problem. It's a Egypt problem. It's a Jordan problem. It's an Arab nation problem. What does the framework in Gaza look like afterwards? Yes, Israel will be a strong part of that. But yeah, that's why winning is always hard to define. Achieving the stated goals of this war, Israel declared war against Hamas, are a lot easier to define. But that day after will matter a lot. But it will, those are so many variables in that.
You said you've seen a lot of plans of IDF for the day after. Tell us, what did you see there? We didn't.
So, public record, I've heard, let's say.
No, not public record.
I mean, that's, I don't have any access to any information that you don't, but I've seen things such as, which is a very standard in counterinsurgency too, like we did in Iraq, is to assign ownership of certain areas, let's say in northern Gaza, to either tribal leaders, local leaders, family leaders, and then you can make the problem not as big, right? The national representation of Gaza is going to be challenging since the Palestinian Authority says they don't want anything to do with it. I know that's a very politically complex, but there are plans where there have been areas in northern Gaza that have been cleared, which you could enter these other phases of stability that people talk about in counterinsurgency, like we did, even I did in Baghdad, which was really gang leaders were running certain neighborhoods. They kept things safe. They managed, they allowed for governance to happen. But that's why this is a very complex of what the plan is, and then who takes ownership of it. Israel's not going to run Gaza. Everybody knows that. But they'll be a part of establishing the security framework in which allows Gazans to run Gaza.
Finally, if Israel fails to eradicate Hamas, it will be a huge victory to the darkest forces on earth. Would you agree?
100%. If Israel fails to bring the hostages home, if Israel fails to dismantle Hamas as an organization, meaning October 7th was a victory for not just Hamas, but its Iran backers, you would see more of those all across Israel and the world for sure. Terrorism can't be allowed to win, and dismantling Hamas is the surest way that it's not a victory for them. If they walk away alive, whether in Gaza or not, as in they live to fight another day, then their strategy worked, and you'll see more hostage taking and more October 7th style attacks in Israel and in other places, because it's being shown as a political methodology or a plan to achieve success and power.
Mr. John Spencer, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you. תודה רבה.